Hello, everyone. It's 6 o'clock. We're going to give it a few more minutes. It appears that a link on a flyer that went out doesn't appear to be working. You can, well, I guess everybody who's here already figured out how to get on, so it won't help giving y'all instructions. But we're going to give it a couple more minutes to let folks trickle in. Thank you. Zena, if you haven't already, can you please make it so Jason Montague and Ryan Lester can share their screen?
Can we go ahead and test that out right now? Actually, they should be able to. Can you?
Sure, I'll do so now.
Just to make sure that you have access. Okay.
Cool.
Okay, it looks like we have quite a few attendees. So it looks like everybody figured out how to join without too much issue. So we will go ahead and get this started. So first, I would like to welcome everybody to the second community workshop for the housing and safety element updates. Thank you for taking your valuable time this evening, for joining us for this very important task. So the workshop before you this evening is essentially, we've compiled a list of vacant and underutilized sites within the city that we think can accommodate our regional housing needs allocation, which is our basically the allotment of housing units that we need to provide as required by the state and as distributed by ABAG over the next 8-year housing element cycle. So this is going to be an opportunity for you to look at these sites and be like, no, you guys, that's a terrible site to include, and this is why you shouldn't include it. Or, hey, what about this one? You guys forgot about this site over here, and we think this would be an excellent site for housing, potentially to help meet the RENA numbers. So that's the kind of feedback we're looking for this evening. There will be more opportunities, throughout the course of the rest of this year to comment. The next big event will be taking the housing opportunity sites before the Planning Commission and City Council in February. We have a date tentatively scheduled for February 22nd for a joint Planning Commission and City Council meeting, and that will begin at 4 p.m. So that will be another opportunity where we'll be presenting more of a streamlined set of sites based on the feedback we received this evening. And one other thing I would like to note, while this isn't a formal public hearing, we're not going to be timing comments at the end. There are a lot of people on the workshop right now, so I just like everyone to be respectful of everyone's time and make sure everybody has enough time to speak. So with that, I will be turning this over to Ryan Lester with Mintier Harnish, and he'll be giving a quick introduction of the process this evening.
All right, thanks, Aaron. Let me share my screen here. All right. So thank you for joining us for workshop number 2. We're happy to have you here. Sorry if you had a little bit of a hassle getting here. I apologize. So my name is Ryan Lester. I'm the Deputy Project Manager for the consultant team. I'm with Mintier Harnish. Also with us tonight is Jim Harnish, the Consultant Project Manager, and Jason Montague, who's an Associate Planner with Rincon Consultants, and he's working on the team that's actually putting together the sites inventory. So what are we going to do tonight? I'll present a quick housing element overview for anyone who wasn't at workshop number 1. We'll quickly talk about the project schedule, and then we'll move into discussing the sites inventory process, housing credits and ADU trends that can be counted towards the RHNA. Jason will walk us through a preliminary site, slides of the preliminary sites, and then we'll facilitate a discussion where we'll really look to your feedback on those sites as well as any additional sites we haven't considered. And then quickly, we'll just talk about next steps. So the housing element, what is the housing element? Well, the housing element provides an assessment of both current and future housing needs and identifies opportunities and constraints on housing production. Then it looks to establish goals, policies, and programs to meet the housing need. And finally, the housing element is updated to reflect new state laws. So how can you participate in the housing element process? Well, housing issues affect the entire community. So we're really looking for you to help us identify housing issues within the community and then to help us craft solutions that work for everyone. So as Aaron mentioned, there are a number of opportunities for you to participate. We're holding focus group meetings, community workshops, planning commission hearings, and city council hearings that all have public discussion and comment periods. And I should add, you can also, after this meeting, during this meeting, you can send us comments directly on the website using the comment button that's right on the homepage. Okay, so schedule, where are we at in the process? So right now, we're currently preparing the admin draft housing element update. We'll be doing that for the next couple of months. We're also taking on a public health, safety, and noise element update that was triggered by state law. And then throughout the summer and the rest of the year, we'll move through public review draft housing element phase, HCD review and revisions, as well as environmental documentation for both the housing element and the safety element update. And then finally, final public review and adoption. And it should be noted that the HCD deadline for housing element submission is January 31st of next year. So now Jason's going to take us through the rest of the process.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Good evening, everybody. So we'll start with a brief introduction to the sites inventory process and what is required for a sites inventory by the state of California. So next slide, please. So first, we'll talk about the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, also referred to as the RHNA. So the RHNA is a mandated process by the state and is aimed at quantifying housing needs throughout a particular region. The RHNA sets the number of how many market rate and below market rate housing units are needed to accommodate for each jurisdiction in the region based on expected growth. The RHNA process starts at the state level with the California Department of Housing and Community Development, also referred to as HCD. And then once the statewide RHNA allocation is determined, HCD issues allocations to all the regional governments in California. So in the case with St. Helena, it is the ABAG, Bay Area Association of Governments. ABAG is then tasked with distributing a RHNA allocation across the region based on an analysis of housing need for each jurisdiction. Each jurisdiction must then prepare a housing element that shows that they have enough adequately zoned area within the jurisdiction to accommodate the RHNA allocation. So an adequate sites inventory that shows that this is one of the primary thresholds criteria necessary to achieve HCD support and get the housing elements certified. And then one additional point of clarification I wanted to make about the sites inventory is that the city does not directly build housing, and the RHNA does not guarantee or require that housing will be built on the identified sites. The housing element is simply required to show that there is enough adequately zoned land in the city to accommodate the city's fair share of the RHNA. So here's St. Helena's RHNA allocation. The city is allocated 254 housing units. They were allocated across multiple income categories that need to be planned for. So each income category is defined by a certain percentage of the county's area median income. So for example, the very low income units would be affordable for a household that makes between 30 to 50% of the area median income. So in Napa County, that's 88,000. So a low income unit would be affordable to someone who makes $26,000 to $44,000 per year. The site's inventory also incorporates a 20% buffer for each category in case identified sites develop with less units than anticipated or with a different affordability level. So to accommodate the RHNA plus the 20% buffer, St. Helena sites inventory needs to show that the city can support 121 units affordable to the very low income category, 71 to the low income, 31 to moderate income, and 79% to the above moderate income category for a total of 302 units. So this total number of units is what the city will need to plan for the next 8 years. And next slide, please. So there are a few ways the city can accommodate its RHNA allocation. We can consider projects under review or approved that are expected to be built during the 8-year life of the housing element. We can also consider ADU trends that are expected to be permitted over the 8-year life of the housing element. And these first two ways are referred to as credits to the RHNA and are typically done before identifying any opportunity sites in the site's inventory. And then after we take into account the RHNA credits, we move to the site identification. City-owned sites are prioritized because the city has more control on what is developed on that site. Other sites include vacant and non-vacant sites that are zoned for residential use and have redevelopment potential. And lastly, we consider sites that could potentially be rezoned to accommodate a higher density of residential units. Next slide, please. So there are a number of state requirements for selecting sites, which limit the sites that can be included in the site's inventory. When selecting sites, we need to consider environmental constraints such as flood zones and fire severity zones, as well as if the site has access to existing utilities or if new utilities would have to be constructed. If new utilities are constructed or need to be constructed, it could be a constraint to housing. Sites also need to have redevelopment potential, meaning that it is reasonable to assume that the site could potentially redevelop in the next 8 years. Sites with newer improvements or existing multifamily have lower redevelopment potential and are therefore not considered. The state also has certain size and density requirements for sites identified for lower income. Lower income is kind of an all-encompassing term for very low and low RHNA categories. These sites need to have a density of at least 20 units per acre and be larger than ½ an acre and smaller than 10 acres. Location of lower income sites is also important, and access to schools, jobs, amenities, healthcare facilities, and grocery stores must also be considered. For all sites, realistic capacity assumptions for residential units were assumed based on characteristics of the site, rather than assuming that the sites would be developed to the maximum capacity. Next slide, please. So we're going to quickly talk about the ADU trends and the housing credits. So pending projects that are anticipated to be built during the life of the housing element consist of 92 units. The income category for these pending units is based on the anticipated sale or rental price of the unit. ADU trends in the city show approximately 9 permitted ADUs per year. It can be assumed that this trend of 9 permitted ADUs per year will continue and that 72 ADUs affordable to above moderate income households would be permitted over the 8-year life of the housing element. All right, next slide, please. So now we're going to shift gears and go through the sites that are currently being considered as part of the site's inventory. So the first opportunity site is approximately 1.7 acres located at 1480 Main Street. The site is currently used as a fire station at the top of the site and vacant structures at the bottom of the site. The city owns this site and has the goal of redeveloping the vacant structures for multifamily residential use. It is reasonably assumed that this site could support 31 lower income units with an assumed 50% density bonus. This site would require a zone change from public, quasi-public to mixed use to support a mix of residential and commercial use. All right, second opportunity site. So the second opportunity site is approximately 0.9 acre and is located at 1572 Railroad Avenue. The site is currently used as a teen center. The city owns this site as well and has the goal of redeveloping the site for multifamily and residential use.
Hey, Jason, sorry to interrupt you real quick. That's actually currently City Hall.
That's City Hall. Okay. All right. So the city also owns this site and has the goal of redeveloping the site for multifamily residential use. It is reasonably assumed that this site could support 30 lower income units with an assumed 50% density bonus. And the site would require a zone change from business and professional office to high density residential to support residential use. Next slide, please. So the third opportunity site is approximately 0.7 acre and is located at 900 Crane Avenue. The site is currently used as a construction storage yard. The property owner of this site has expressed interest in redeveloping this site into 12 above moderate income units. The site would require a zone change from industrial to medium density residential to support residential use. And the next slide, please. Okay. So the fourth opportunity site is approximately 0.3 acre and is located at 905 Main Street. The site is currently vacant and is in a strategic location along Main Street. The site could realistically support 5 above moderate income units and would require a zone change from service commercial to mixed use to support a mix of residential and commercial uses. And next slide, please. Okay, so the fifth opportunity site is approximately 1.8 acres and is located at the east corner of Main Street and Mills Lane. The site is currently vacant and development of an affordable housing project is currently in progress. The site could realistically support 36 lower income units and would require a zone change from service commercial to high density residential to support multifamily residential use. Next slide, please. The sixth opportunity site consists of 2 sites located at 709 and 741 McCorkle Avenue. The 2 sites consolidated add up to approximately 1.8 acres. There's 1 single family residence on each parcel, and the site is in close proximity to surrounding high residential zoning districts and recent multifamily development. This site could potentially be rezoned from medium density residential to high density residential to support 28 lower income units. And this site is currently an optional site at the moment and is not currently included in the site's inventory calculation, but may be included later. And the next slide, please. Okay, so the 7th opportunity site is approximately 1 acre and is located at 821 Pope Street. There's currently 1 single family residence on the parcel. The site could realistically support 20 lower income units and no zone change would be required. This site was used in the previous inventory, so therefore state law requires that a project can be approved by right on this site if the project includes a 20% affordability component to it. And next slide, please. So the 8th opportunity site consists of 3 parcels located at 882 and 886 College Avenue. The 3 parcels consolidated add up to approximately 1.5 acres and are currently vacant and in proximity to other surrounding existing multifamily development. The border on this picture is a little off. It really should cut off at the top of the grass there. So it is vacant and those white structures are not included on the site. The property owner has expressed interest in redeveloping the site for residential use. This site could be potentially rezoned from agriculture to high density residential to support 24 lower income units. This site is also an optional site at the moment and is not currently included in the site inventory calculation, but it could be added later. Next slide, please. So the 9th opportunity site consists of 2 parcels located at 1447 and 1515 Spring Street. The 2 parcels consolidated add up to approximately 2.4 acres and currently have 1 single family residence on each parcel. This site could realistically support 38 moderate income units without a rezone. And again, this site was used in the inventory, in the past inventory. So state law requires that a project can be approved by right on this site if the project includes 20% affordable units. Next slide, please. Okay, so the 10th site is approximately 4.4 acres and is located along Spring Street. There is no assigned address to the site. The site is currently used as a vineyard, and the property owner has expressed interest in the development of this site for residential use. The site is currently zoned for medium density residential and could be rezoned for high density residential to realistically support between 22 to 71 units. And this site was also used in the last housing element. So the by right requirement is there. And this site is also an optional site and is not currently included in the site's inventory calculation, but may be included later. Next slide, please. So the 11th opportunity site is approximately 1.5 acres and is located at 1817 Spring Street. The parcel currently has one single family residence on it. The site is currently zoned for medium density residential and could be rezoned to high density residential to realistically support 8 to 24 units. This site was used in the last cycle, so the by right requirement is there. And this site is also currently an optional site and is not currently included in the site's inventory calculation, but can be included later. Next slide, please. So the 12th opportunity site is approximately 3.46 acres and is located at 1998 Spring Street. The parcel currently has two single family residences on it, with a large portion of the site being vacant. This site could realistically support 17 above moderate income sites. It would not require a zone change. There is a small creek that runs along the northern portion of the site's boundary, but the site is not in a flood zone. And next slide, please. So the 13th and final opportunity site is approximately 2.9 acres with about 3/4 of an acre of vacant land. It's located at 601 Pope Street. So the occupied portion of the site is currently used for senior retirement living. The vacant portion of this site could realistically support 15 lower income units without a zone change. So it would only be developing that vacant area to the south of the site. All right, next slide, please. So here's a figure showing all 13 opportunity sites and their geographic locations around the city. The orange outline sites represent the sites that are being considered for either moderate or above moderate units. The red sites are being considered for lower income units, and the green sites are the 4 sites that I mentioned previously that are currently optional and could be considered for low income units with a rezone, and may or may not be added into the site's inventory. Next slide, please. So here's a table showing the preliminary numbers for arena credits and opportunity sites. As you can see, there are enough units to accommodate the moderate and above moderate income categories, but there is still a shortfall of lower income sites. So to accommodate the lower income arena, one or more of the 4 optional sites would need to be included in the site's inventory for lower income units. So there is flexibility in identifying which sites should be concluded. So 45 additional lower income units would be needed to hit the lower income arena plus the 20% buffer. Next slide, please.
Okay, so now thank you, Jason, for the rundown of all the sites. Hopefully, all the participants out there have had a chance to look at those sites. They've been posted to our website. So we just wanted to facilitate a discussion with you. The 2 things we're really asking for are, of the proposed sites, are there any challenges or constraints we haven't considered? Is there a reason we shouldn't use one of these sites? And then the other question, are there any sites that we haven't considered that we should consider? You know, Aaron, do you? I don't think I have access to letting people in.
No, yeah, we're gonna let Xenia manage allowing folks to speak. So if you would like to speak, you can use the raise hand function at the bottom of the screen, or if you're on the phone, I believe it's *9. Xenia, can you correct me if I'm wrong there?
Yes, let me go ahead and pull up the share a screen here on how to participate. Are you able to see this PowerPoint slide? Can you see it? Okay, so for members of the public that wish to participate, you can do so by dialing 669-900-6833. At the prompt, you can enter 819-9669-7293, press pound, and you can press *9 to speak. And yes, you should have a raised, you should be able to raise your hand on your screen via Zoom, and I will call on your name one by one. Give me 1 second. I see a couple of hands already raised. Okay, let's, Mr. Jeff Farmer, I will allow you to speak. Go ahead, Mr. Farmer.
Thank you very much. That was a pretty comprehensive list. I have no real comments on whether any of those sites are, what the possibilities are, but I will add a couple sites. One is the closed Catholic school on the corner of Tainter and Oak. That might be available at some point. I know there's been some talk with the church officials. I don't know where that stands right now. But that's a site that I would be interested in seeing converted to housing. The second site, I'm not sure. I don't think it was on your list. Was the corporation yard of the city over by where We Care is. I understand that's probably going to move somewhere anyway, and that might be available for low to middle income housing. So those are two sites that I don't think I saw on your list. My third question is on additional development units or ADUs. And if people are allowed to build them on their property, is there some way to enforce that they actually rent them out to people and don't turn into just my relatives staying for the weekend kind of place? Because I know we've seen that in the past and it hasn't worked out very well. That's all.
Thank you for the comments, Jeff. Really appreciate you bringing up the Catholic school and courtyard, and we'll be sure to address those moving forward. As far as the ADUs go, yeah, unfortunately, there's nothing we can do to require that they're rented out.
So if a person builds an ADU, does the city get some kind of credit even though they don't rent it out to anybody? Is it just basically that?
We can use those per state law to count toward our arena numbers, yes.
Okay, so it doesn't necessarily solve anything having an ADU.
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, and we have Ms. Norma Ferris. You should be unmuted.
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much for that list and the work, Ryan and Aaron. I think I want to ask about two potential sites. One in the corner of Fulton and east of the railroad tracks. There's both on the north side and the south side of Fulton. There's a pretty two big tracks that are just gravel right now. So I don't know if those are potential sites.
Yeah, though that's privately owned, and the man who owns it is looking to actually develop it, not for residential uses, which is why we didn't include it.
Oh, okay. And I guess you already answered my second one. If you said, so these are opportunities that are not privately owned, all your list, or some are privately owned?
Most are privately owned, some
Okay.
are owned by the city.
Yeah. So what happened with, and I'm not sure if I heard it's in your list, the big property development by Vineyard Valley. I think it's called the Hunter Project, or I don't know if that's the one.
So the Hunter project is included as a pending project. So we don't need to include that as a housing opportunity site because it's already a project that's in progress. So we we can already count those units without them being a housing opportunity site.
Oh, okay. And a third one is in Pope. Yeah, in Pope, you show one that close to the Silverado Orchard. But then if you continue going east towards College, wasn't there a big space there? Yeah, there is a big space there that at some moment I think it was potential low income housing.
Well, there was a large housing project on the table at one point in time. Those sites were used in our previous housing element, so we didn't include those again, because if we include them in this round, it would be by right development with 20% affordable. And given the size of those parcels, we didn't think it was good to reuse them again in this housing element.
Sorry, I didn't completely understand you. So they were on the list before, and now they're not in the list because then you will be forcing them to have 20% low income. Why?
Well, whatever development that would occur would be by right. The city would lose its discretion. And the project that was pending on those was not affordable per se. They were very large homes on pretty big lots, and the affordable components of that were proposed to be off-site, if I remember correctly.
Okay, so there's no option there, basically.
It's just there's better sites, we feel.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and we have Mr. Joe McGrath. You have been unmuted, Mr. McGrath.
I think you may be muted, Joe.
Yes, you have to unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry. Good evening. Sorry about that. I just have a couple of points, and I guess I'll just go through them quickly here. One is I'm always sort of scratching my head a little bit on the feasibility component of this, and particularly with respect to sort of owner intent and how much due diligence the team has done there. And just, I'm looking at a couple of these, and this is not, I don't have any sort of insider knowledge here other than trying to stay aware of what's going on. But like the Spring Street site, I think just changed hands. I believe that site's encumbered by a vineyard lease, like for many years. I mean, so there's things like that that may prohibit that site from being developed, the 3-acre site. The McCorkle sites, I know one of them is pending contract, and I don't believe that individuals desires to develop that site of any other than beyond what's required in a single family compound. The other McCorkle site just got renovated. So I sort of scratch my head with respect to how much feasibility component is done with respect to kind of, in addition to environmental constraints and utilities and circulation and things like that. Is this feasible with respect to owner intent? Right, because ultimately, at the end of the day, if that's not there, then that's not going to happen. And then the other example of that is kind of interesting that the Fulton site was mentioned, because I know that individual. I don't want to speak for him, but at one point in time, a residential project was proposed for that site, but because it wasn't zoned residential, I believe that was changed to a mixed use or commercial project. And so you get in a catch-22 situation here with respect to, zoning, current zoning versus future potential zoning versus owner intent, which sort of gets you in a cycle, making it very difficult to develop. The next question, I guess I have, so I don't know if you want to respond to that. How much due diligence are we doing with respect to, is this really feasible that the owner wants to sell this for privately owned sites, or they have the desire to work with the city in that direction?
I mean, we're obviously looking at sites that we hope will be developed, and the more information we can get, the better. We we can only do so much. And I know that, per HCD, we don't need, obviously the way to go, and, the more, intent we have from a landowner, the better, but it's not required for this process. But we do want to use and identify sites that we think or have a high likelihood of being developed during the course of the housing element cycle.
Yeah, I just think it's really important that the city look at this challenge as not only, there's two challenges here. One is meeting the requirements of the housing element and the RENA allocation numbers. And the other is actually solving a community problem, which is to provide, a mix of housing that accommodates, the socioeconomic distribution that is in the community and necessary for a vital community. And so, we can't lose track of the latter as we go through this process, and feasibility is a huge part of that. I guess the next point I have is, on the optional sites, does that grant that site any distinct legal differentiation from how it's already just currently zoned, were that to be deemed an optional site under the housing element? Does that make that site any more advantageous than any other site?
So yeah, to clarify, we're not deeming them optional in the housing element. They're optional at this stage of the game.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we essentially have a menu, if you will, of sites, and we're just trying to fine tune which sites we're actually going to include.
Okay. And then I guess the next comment I have, and I know this is probably constrained by the housing element process itself, but it kind of seems like, getting back to the feasibility question, that there should be some sort of, is there opportunity for this to be a parameter driven process? Or that there's, meaning kind of like CEQA exemptions. If it is, meaning if site comes up that we didn't foresee as being a site, but it has the parameters that we've defined to sort of be incorporated in as a housing opportunity site. Let's say it's a half a mile from transportation. Let's say it's between a half acre and 5 acres. Let's say it's served by public utilities. Is there some parameter driven way to do this process? Because, having witnessed this process for many years, we always get the wrong sites. Or we get 10% of the right sites or something like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's because the city's not in the business of developing property most of the time.
No, I understand, but hopefully we're in the business of creating a process that actually solves the problem.
Yeah, that would be through zoning.
But I mean, okay. But again, I won't beat on that. The only other site that it seems like, in sort of the sandwich to the corporate yard site would be across the street on Charter Oak. That would seem like a really sort of close to downtown, behind Gott's and across the street from the corporate yard on the south side of the river. That's all my comments for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay, we have Jordan Bentley. You are unmuted.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for bringing us together. And I realized that Joe hit my main talking point, which was I was wanting to hear from you if you have done any processing in terms of really reaching out to the owners and understanding their intent or want to have their property be developed for these particular reasons. For instance, the Spring Street property was the one that raised my hairs the most, simply because I do know that it changed hands and there's that vineyard lease. So I really am, I just support what Joe said, and I'm excited to see how this process unfolds, and looking forward to supporting the properties that are actually feasible to develop, and getting a list of properties that can be developed versus just looking from a map and looking at acreage and all of that, which I understand at this point in the process, identifying properties is the first step. But I look forward to identifying properties that can really be developed, and whether it's through rezoning or owners are excited about it, however it might be, but look forward to getting to that point in this whole process.
Thank you, Jordan. Yeah, no, the information about, I believe we're talking about 1998 Spring Street. That's very helpful to us to find out about it changing hands and there being the vineyard lease. And I would like to point out that of the sites chosen, 2 of which are city controlled right now, 1480 Main Street and 1572 Railroad. So obviously there's been policy direction to look toward, building high density on the 1572 Railroad site. So we know the intent there. And then also with, having a mixed use, designation on the 1480 Main Street site to accommodate housing there. We also, have been in discussions with our town, St. Helena, about the Phelps property adjoining Main Street. So we know that site, as far as feasibility goes, is a good one. I think the Montessori properties, we've heard from them over the course of time that they're definitely interested in housing there. So we have on a number of these sites, had owner input that they're interested. So we're trying to get that as best we can.
Great.
Next, we have Pat Friday. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for all the identified properties and for having this forum. I really appreciate it. As I walk around the neighborhood, one of the places that I was really hoping would be a site is the one on Crane, and I'm so happy to hear that that's in the list and a real possibility. I wonder also, I don't know the addresses of these 2 spots, but across Spring Street from the Episcopal Church is a property that used to be a church that isn't anymore. I think there's a portable behind the structure that's used for yoga. I don't know who owns it. It could be a church entity, but if that's a possibility, that would be a great location for affordable housing because it's walking distance to everything. And then also on Spring Street across from the cemetery, there's a big tract of empty land there. And I wondered if that had been considered.
We'll take a look. I can't speak to whether that site was considered right now. I don't recall off the top of my head. I can say that there are challenges with non-vacant sites, especially if they're owned by an entity such as a church, who are traditionally, it's hard to get those properties. And there's also additional challenges from HCD for sites that aren't vacant. So they can be more problematic, but we'll look into the one across from the cemetery as well.
Yes, that one's vacant.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a few more hands. We have Mr. Rick Krebs. I believe you can speak now, Mr. Krebs.
Yes, can you hear me? Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to address you tonight. My name is Rick Krebs. I'm a 37-year resident of St. Helena, and I'm speaking to you tonight as a member of the St. Helena Housing Coalition. It's a nonprofit public interest 501c3 trying to bring workforce housing to St. Helena, but in a different tranche that's been addressed in the past. Our goal is for those in the missing middle, those making between $50,000 and $120,000 a year. I applaud you for your efforts in identifying properties, but perhaps a light analogy might be appropriate. In the next 8 years, I envision having a villa and a Ferrari in its garage in Monaco. It's a wonderful vision, but the realistic chances of that happening are slim or none. We've been working with the majority of the property owners that you've listed and some that you haven't. And I haven't been said no more times to than when I was asking girls for dates in high school. So your goals, while laudable, are not realistic. They're just not. We approached one owner of properties zoned high density. Their employer in town, they're begging for help. We offered them $200,000 a year as a ground lease for the property. And they end up saying, oh no, we just like the way it looks. And I'm not using that as atypical. I'm saying it's atypical. It's a typical response. So I'm not sure what your exercise really accomplishes. If you could enlighten me, please.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how to answer that. This is a mandate from the state of California. We're required to show that we can provide, or at least accommodate a certain number of housing units. It's a state requirement. We have to do it.
But whether it's realistic or not.
Try and make it as realistic as we possibly can under the circumstances we're dealing with.
The last thing I would ask is, it would be good to know how many people are on this call. And that's the end of my questions. Thank you.
Sure, I am showing currently 29 attendees. I believe at one point we had 33 and 9 panelists. So currently 29 attendees and 9 panelists.
Would that be all, Mr. Krebs?
That's it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, up next we have Miss Mary Stevenson. One second, Miss Stevenson. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, it's Mary Stevenson calling from our town, St. Helena. I have a couple of questions and a couple of comments. One, echoing what Rick said, those of us who've been involved in affordable housing have contacted all the people that you've listed on your properties over the years, and we might have some information that could be useful in pursuing these. Secondly, the elephant in the room is Adams Street. I think at the very least, we need to provide some kind of rationale why that property, city-owned property, is not included in this opportunity site. Third, I would like to see some kind of analysis of the ADUs that have been built over the last 10 years. And if any of them are in a house that's under $2 million, and if any of them are actually being rented. Even the ones at Magnolia Oaks, which were built to be rented as low-income housing, the last time I looked, only the 2 that were in a low-income house were actually being rented. So it's disturbing to me that we would continue to use ADUs as part of our housing element when it is not realistic that these are actually being rented, even at market rate. And another question I have is, I think there's something over 40% of the land within the city limits that's in vineyard. And I'm wondering what percentage of that land in vineyard is actually zoned for housing? And have we identified all those land and see, because I know there's at least 3 that I know of that have been replanted in the last 2 years. And so do we have any long-term plan on which land that is in vineyard now in town that's zoned for housing will remain in vineyard and what will be in housing? And my last question is that several of these properties need to be rezoned, and we're working with the city on that. I'm wondering if there's a way that we could consolidate properties that need to be rezoned or do some process that would allow us to do a rezoning of land so we could build housing that would not be so extraordinarily expensive and time consuming. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. A lot to unpack there. I will say your last question about If we do identify multiple sites that need to be rezoned, we will be doing those all at once as part of this process. It'll probably be after certification and adoption by HCD, but we do have the ability to do that. As far as land and vineyard that's zoned for housing, I don't know, what that number is, but if it's zoned for housing, eventually we desire for that to be housing. That's a policy decision that was made by the city council. The ADU analysis, I don't know. That would have to be designated by the city council as a priority task for staff, and I don't see us, at the moment having the ability to do that. As far as Adams Street goes, we will definitely, when this goes before the Planning Commission and City Council, will address why that wasn't a site that was selected, but it's, obviously a somewhat politically divisive site. Everybody kind of has a different opinion on what should be done with it. And we really wanted to focus on sites that we think have at least a decent probability of being developed over the course of this 8-year housing cycle. But we will do that. And, if we bring it to Planning Commission and the City Council and they, want Adams Street on there, that's something that they can do. So that will be addressed. Thank you though, Mary.
Yeah, and to add on that, I can touch on two things. So first, the ADU question. So all of the ADUs that are being assumed in this housing element are allocated to the above moderate income category. So there's no assumptions that they're going to be to have, affordable to lower or moderate income categories. And then regarding the rezone question, there is a requirement. If you rely on sites that need to be rezoned, they need to be rezoned. I believe it's within a year of housing element adoption. So, and the purpose for that is that it needs to be rezoned so that it can then be used for housing early in the housing element process. So you can't, so you got to, if you rely on those sites, then you need to do it quickly and so that it could be available for housing. So I just wanted to touch on that a little bit.
Great. Can I make one other comment?
Sure.
That's great news about the rezoning thing, because I think that will help us on a couple of the sites that have the possibility near term to be housing. The ADU thing is still disturbing to me that we would put any ADUs into a housing element as far as potential housing. Because I think if you looked at every single house that's been built in St. Helena in the last 3 years, they've all got density bonuses for ADUs. And they're all houses that are selling at $3 million and above. And there is no way those houses will ever have rentals in those ADUs. So I think that is kind of the, I don't think that's realistic. And I don't think it's particularly honest on our part to say that those ADUs that are being built in St. Helena will ever be rental housing for anybody.
Thank you, Mary.
Okay, next we have just John. Let me unmute you here. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I reiterate what Mary was saying about the ADUs. That's always been a bone of contention with me for ever since that came up about, as I recall, about 13 years ago, 14 years ago. But the site on Crane Avenue by the creek has a major power line running across that bisects the property. And that has to be dealt with before you build any housing there, because it's a 50-foot easement right across the middle of the property.
Thank you very much for letting us know that. We will certainly look into that.
Okay, thank you for doing this. This is very informative.
Thank you, John.
Okay, next we have Miss Jennifer Laliberte.
Good evening. John just made one of my comments for me, but also related to North Crane. There's another parcel adjacent to the larger parcel, and it would be the only non-residentially zoned parcel in that neighborhood. So and we talked about this before at our focus group meeting, and I just wonder if it can be included.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, if we end up if 900 Crate ends up being included as a site, I think we'll definitely need to include that one. You're correct.
Thank you.
Next, we have Miss Tracy McBride.
Hi, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the comments that everybody has made so far. I think they're really good comments, and I get that everybody wants to make this work and want it to be productive. One of my comments is, I thought I heard in the introduction somewhere along the lines about rentals and owned properties. And I don't know that this is appropriate in the housing element, but I'd like to make the point that I think that there should be some low income housing that is owned as part of the plan, not just 100% rentals. And I think that's important to have that balance in our town and not have 100% of our low income housing be only rentals. So that's one point. Another subject that catches a lot of people's attention is, of course, the ADU. And I'd like to include this idea of in-law apartments. I mean, I guess that you can't really count an in-law apartment. It has to be this separate ADU structure to be counted as a residential need. But, it does, we are working overall in a greater scope other than St. Helena, that ADUs are going to help with some of our housing needs. And if it's going to work or not work, it'd be interesting to see in your presentation materials some of the math behind it. So, do you look at, say, some rental offerings that have been made in the last year, and what are the rental prices and what income bracket does that put people at to afford those rentals? So maybe it's an apartment, but oftentimes there is a little, cottage or something available, in town that is offered as housing. It is a rental, usually is an ADU. And I'm not totally convinced that they would not be potentially there for some more, moderate income housing. And I'd like to see some of the math behind that in some of your research. If you could include that in the presentation materials, I think it would be valid to know, rather than all of us having in our mind, and, and I get that a $3 million house, they're probably not going to rent out their ADU, but people maybe are going to move towards that as they age in place, as they need help living at the house. Who knows what it's going to be. Another point on the map of the sites on your website, when you click the box that says lower income, I see the sites that come up, around Railroad and around Pope Street and down around Mills and Main Street. But in the presentation tonight, I thought I saw sites in red, which were the lower income sites. I saw site 9, which is on Spring Street, which has like those 2 driveways that connect to Spring, as being a potential lower income site. And, there's obviously a lot of repetition. It's talk in town that all of the low income sites are east of Main Street. And that would be one site that is west of Main Street. So it would be nice to see that as balance if that really is a lower income potential site. So it's not in agreement with the map that you have on your website. And I think a really interesting concept to educate property owners about is this by right idea that, can you incentivize any owners? Maybe it's not this time. And if I've got it correct that this is every 8 years, maybe maybe somebody's not ready to build and develop their scenic vineyard land right now, but where are we going to be in 50 years? Some of this vineyard property that's within the city limits. I mean, how long does it make sense for it to stay vineyard property? And if I, understand the meaning of by right, they might be given some advantages to being on this list, in one housing element go around, so that when it comes back in 8 years, maybe their development is going to be easier. And I think that that's a really giant incentive for people. And I think educating to people that, okay, maybe they don't want to develop it now, maybe not even 8 years, but maybe in 16 years, they are going to want to see, some housing there and, a diverse group of housing. I don't quite follow that some of the sites are by right and then they're just market rate housing only 100%. I'm not following that. But especially if it's something that contributes to the community and the property owner, I think that this is a really interesting idea to make it clear to people how it could be incentive for them for the future. And then I do just want to touch upon, I think it is, as someone mentioned, about the Adams Street property and, maybe why it's hard to get a church to develop property versus a private property owner. I'm not sure I'm following why it would be any harder to get a church to develop than private property owner. But, I think this whole feasibility thing that other people have brought up is critical. And we want to make this work. People do have property rights, understandably, but if something could be communicated in the presentations, what is someone wants to develop? Are they a 10 or are they a 0? Or where do they really want to develop? Are they, what is their eagerness to develop? Are they just thinking about it? And so that the communications are clear, that people know what to expect. I do think that some parcels that have been suggested are really interesting to consider as possible additions that other people have suggested. Again, just to put into the documentation, not just when it gets to the planning commission stage about the Adams property, but really explaining to us, the members of the public, to discuss it. Of course, it is political, but it is, things change. I don't know. And it's good to have out there, I think, from the beginning, and not just put it before the planning commission without getting this buildup of public input, again, from the community as we go. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Tracy.
Up next, we have Miss Norma Ferris again. Okay, I think she put her hand down. Let's try Mr. Joe McGrath. Go ahead, Mr. McGrath.
Yeah, I just had a couple more thoughts and maybe questions. So something like the Beckstoffer Dr. Crane where a third of Dr. Crane Vineyard is zoned high density residential, is that currently counting towards the RENA numbers because it's already zoned that way?
No, we only get credit for RENA numbers when units are actually constructed. So that's a great example of a site we wouldn't want to use.
Okay, so even though it's already currently zoned high density residential, it doesn't count towards the current cycle RENA.
Correct.
Okay. The second question I have is there, when you look at the Catholic school and it's empty now, I'm curious, if you rezone that, would then you, and the school wanted to go back in there, would then they need now to rezone it again? Or do they have continuous rights, even though the school's not currently used? Or would they have to get a conditional use permit or something like that?
Good question. I would probably let the lawyers handle that one.
Okay, so that leads me to the follow-on question is it possible to dual zone a property?
Nope.
I guess the other comment I have is it's not clear to me why we're this seems to go against all sort of conventional wisdom and social policy, why we're sort of designating and breaking sites down within the affordable categories to say a low income site or a very low income site. That seems to go against all sort of social theory versus if you're in the affordable category and then assume a mix of affordable within that site.
Yeah, I agree. The optics don't work out great, but I don't know, Jason, if you want to elaborate on that. But just because basically when we're saying lower income, it means it can accommodate them. It doesn't mean that it's strictly designated for them.
It just doesn't have a very good feel to it when you're starting to say, okay, this is going to be predominantly entirely a low income versus sort of, I think socialist theory would say, we should be targeting more of a mix within the affordability stratas.
I agree.
Yeah, totally. And I agree with that too. And kind of the rationale behind identifying a site, as lower income in HCD's eyes is that it can accommodate if a affordable housing developer came in, they would try to identify sites that were, in this case, at least 20 units per acre, so they can get more units, and then something that's between half an acre and 10 acres. So anything smaller than half an acre might be a little restrictive for an affordable housing developer to come in. But yeah, I do understand that. We get that a lot. You see a site and it just shows, lower income housing. So it's really a zoning exercise. We just need to prove to HCD that the city has the adequate zoning to accommodate these sites. And then the city just can do what they can to facilitate that development. And it's really, the nonprofit affordable housing developers come in, and this is the kind of the site that they look for, according to HCD. It's their methodology.
Okay, thank you. And then I just have a couple suggestions. One is the PG&E property on Mitchell. I don't know if that's been considered. And then maybe the Adams Street thing is maybe we should think about subdividing it so that we can make this not a big binary decision, but a series of smaller decisions. And maybe that's just a thought to make progress in terms of directionally where that goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Next, we have Mr. Rick Krebs. You're unmuted now.
I've already spoken. Hi, I've already spoken.
Your hand was up. I will lower your hand here.
I'm sorry, I must have put my mouse over.
Okay, Jennifer Lalibert, I apologize if I am butchering your last name. Go ahead.
That's okay. Thank you. And I failed to mention that I work with Our Town St. Helena. So I just wanted to ask for clarification. The housing element is a zoning exercise, as you say, but I thought that the law had been revised so that the state has more ability to either incentivize the city to ensure that units get built or to penalize the city if for some reason units don't get built. I thought there was more teeth to the law. under newer legislation. And I'm just wondering if you can answer that to some degree.
Sure, I can take a crack at that. So
Okay.
that is the threat. You know, once this 8-year cycle is up, the threat is that the state is going to crack down if cities don't meet the RENA allocations. The fact of the matter is there's going to be, I mean, I would guess a vast majority of cities across the state of California that aren't going to meet the RENA numbers based on how high they were. So I think a lot of this is going to play out down the road. The real threat from HCD is that if we don't get a certified housing element through them, that they can strip us of our land use authority. That's the immediate threat. That's my understanding. I don't know if anybody else has anything.
I would just add, there's a lot of funding that's tied to housing element compliance. So, you know, we can lose out on a lot of opportunities for funding.
Okay, good. And then I just wanted to add that as you're vetting sites and you publish sites that you're considering, it would be helpful to also include sites that you did consider, but you ruled out, and for what reason, just so we can keep track.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Are we moving on to the next speaker? Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Durbin.
Hi, good evening. I agree with the last comment about it would be helpful if we could have an inventory of sites that have been ruled out and why, and then potential sites. And also, before I forget, I know there have been public comments submitted. In writing, I have, and I know others have. Where can we go to view public comments? As I'd like to be able to read what the other public comments are.
So this isn't a public hearing. We've been collecting them internally. I'll give that some thought. I haven't thought about making them public.
Maybe there's a way you could put them together and then a link on your site or something. Just anyway, but moving on, I'm concerned about the feasibility issue, that there are sites that have not been vetted, and a number of people have spoken up and cast some pretty serious doubts as to whether or not some of these sites are indeed viable for housing. So I thought that we were doing this because we're in dire need of housing in St. Helena. And it's feeling kind of like we're really doing it so that we don't get in big trouble with the state. And I think your hearts as public servants, you really do want the housing. But if it's the state mandate that is the primary impetus, I don't know if all the right steps are being taken to make this a really good thing and a successful thing for the community. So for example, you showed us some sites this evening that could actually be high density, potentially lower income sites on the west side of town, and yet they're not on the actual site list inventory posted on the website, whereas almost all of the sites that are on the site inventory are for medium density and moderate or above moderate income. So it seems like you should bump off some of those that are not as inclusive and incorporate the ones that might be open the door for more housing that's affordable for more people, if you follow me. The numbers, the way they stack up, we need roughly twice as many housing units for low and very low income earners as opposed to moderate and above. And yet the map is not panning out that way. So the current site map indicates all but one option on the west side of town is for people that are moderate and above moderate income, with all the low income and very low income wage earners on the east side of town. The actual site map on the city webpage. Now, you've introduced other possibilities tonight. I'm encouraging you to get them as concrete on the site and vet them and find out if they're feasible. From a less optimistic viewpoint, there's a big disparity between what kind of housing is going on the east side compared to the west side in terms of density and income. And I think we need to be really careful that we're not creating a situation where we're forcing the lowest income earners into the most dense housing situations, and all largely on one side of town, because it kind of smacks of discrimination and almost a form of segregation. And that is the last thing we want in our beautiful town. So somebody touched on this earlier, I think more than one person. I think it's really important that we mix up our population and our people and our housing opportunities, and really avoid the appearances of developing something like a projects on one side of town and then the more luxurious housing on the other side of town. So, you know, that it's a big job. You guys, I know, are working very hard on it, and I'm thankful that we have people such as yourselves working on it. But again, I'm just very concerned that we're not vetting these site options and making sure they're actually tangible, usable things. I think we should use the pressure from the state as an opportunity to really put our heads together and work hard and get something really good done. And further, the housing demands are only going to increase. It's not like when we get through this and meet these needs, we can breathe a big collective sigh of relief that we did it, because we're going to need more. And so that's it. I don't want to, you know, beat a dead horse here, but I would really like to see you somehow get this zoning mixed up and get some I think there should be a roughly equal amount of high density zoning on the west side of town as there is on the east side, and also the same for low and very low income wage earners on both sides of town. And I really think to do any less than that could be setting us up for some kind of a civil rights violation if it ever came down to a legal battle. And we certainly don't want another one of those in St. Helena. So anyway, that's it. I'm rambling now. I'm sorry, but thank you very much for the good work you're doing. Good night.
Thank you very much for the input, Nancy. We appreciate it.
And next we have Steve. Go ahead, Steve. I believe you're muted. You may need to unmute
I
yourself.
think I'm clear now.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. In listening to this discussion tonight, a lot of the points that I would have thought I would raise have been raised already. And I think I can tell generally by looking at your faces that most of these comments are being very well received. I just want to look at one parcel, and I'm not sure I understood your reason for leaving it off, and that of course is Adam Street. I've been working on Adam Street for 15 years, so I'm familiar with it. And one of the advantages of that piece of property, and I'm not advocating one way or another here, is that it's publicly owned. You know, it may have political issues, but in terms of land use issues, it's hard for me to understand why it would not be included as a potential site for housing. There's very little, we may not be able to get the appropriate developer, and maybe we have to subdivide the property and use it partially for one use and partially for another. But it can house an awful lot of people across all income levels on that site. Aaron, what I thought I heard you say was that, well, there are political issues with that site, and we don't really want to put it on for that reason. And I'm not sure I got that right. But I don't understand why it wouldn't be considered as a potential site, because I'm assuming we're never going to get to the point of being able to say, well, we can satisfy all the RENA requirements that we have by the sites that we've identified, and why this would not be a site that should be considered for housing. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Steve.
And we have Pat Friday. And you may unmute yourself now.
Hi, I just wanted to add a comment that I agree with the person who suggested the Adams Street project be broken down into smaller decisions, because I think we really do need to develop that property. Secondly, I'm in a neighborhood off of Spring Street, and at the corner of Spring and St. James Court, there was a property that was, my understanding was a multifamily designation. And in the past year, it's been developed into a single family house. The original property was demolished, and now there's a monster house, actually. It's right across from the Presbyterian Church. And I wonder how that could happen with our planning office, how a property that, and maybe my understanding is wrong, but I understood that it was zoned as multifamily, which could have been a great affordable housing location, is now this monster single family home.
Pat, you can email me. My email is on the planning department's website, and I'll be happy to respond in writing to you about that. We're soliciting feedback on housing opportunity sites this evening.
Thank you.
Okay, next, okay, we have Ms. Norma Ferris. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Ferris.
Based on all the questions, I think somehow it will be good to provide us education on what are the criteria that you use to select sites, because we all mentioned several ones that are not on the list. And that's one thing that I would like a little bit better education and understanding in order to be able to propose or not, especially the ones that are individually, privately owned. And the other thing that I don't, when you put the map, it was my perception that probably they were all very centrally oriented, and that's good, but it's also wondering, for example, what somebody said about the Crane, like in the area of Sulphur Springs and Crane, if that is still city limits and there are vineyards there, why are those not thought about versus others that you show right here that are vineyards and some even have houses in it? So I was wondering why it seems that the locations chosen are more central and not going more towards the edges where there are other vineyards that are still in the residential zone.
Sure, thank you, Norma. Yeah, we have an urban limit line established in our general plan, so that constrains where essentially housing goes within the city. Senior, do we have other hands raised? We're kind of getting up against it here.
Yes, we have one more hand raised. 1 second. And we have Miss Tracy McBride. Go ahead.
Hi, yeah, I just had one additional quick comment to make as in the documentation, so we understand how we're moving forward. With the new laws about an owner by right can subdivide their single family home into maybe a duplex or whatever, or two parcels. I'm just wondering how that might factor into moving forward. You know, I mean, I know that's a big what if, but you know, it'd be nice at least to put that out there so people understand more about that and at least touch upon it, whether it's a factor or not.
That is an excellent question. In fact, I was on a webinar with HCD this morning where that came up, and they're still trying to figure out what they're going to do about it with these housing elements. They've had, I think they said 1 or 2 jurisdictions is all so far, try and get some sort of credit for additional units due to SB 9 subdivisions, and they're still not quite sure how to deal with it. And
Yeah.
that's my understanding. I don't know if Jason or Ryan have any more input, but
I don't have any more input other than that. I've heard that they might approach it in the same way they approach ADUs, and you know, you do a certain amount of permitting and you kind of extrapolate it over the entire life of the housing element. But it's really up in the air right now because it's such a new law, and it's so interesting because it'll apply to all single family zoned housing, where you can subdivide your property and put 2 houses on there instead of 1. So yeah, I think it's definitely just a developing kind of topic that HCD is still trying to figure out at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I get it's developing. It'd be nice just to put the topic in the report, just to bring it to people's awareness so that we can, start thinking about it more.
sure.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Thank you. Okay, Ryan, do you want to show us our closing screen or our closing slides? Nope, you're muted, Ryan.
Sorry about that. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I just quickly want to talk about some next steps in the process so you know where we're headed. So we have an upcoming joint CC meeting study session to present the site's inventory. We will be coordinating with the Napa Sonoma Collaborative on affirmatively furthering fair housing analysis, which is a new section of the a new state requirement of the housing element. And then we'll be putting together the draft housing element background report and policy document in the next few months. So thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate all your comments.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo Ryan. Thank you all very much for attending and taking your valuable time to share your input with us this morning. And again, you can submit comments anytime, sthelenahousing.com. You can sign up on the website for email alerts that will let you know when things are happening, when meetings are happening, when workshops are happening. You can also send comments through the website anytime you would like. With that, we are going to conclude tonight's workshop. And again, thank you everyone for participating, and feel free to reach out anytime.
Thank you.